out your favorite scary podcasts.
Strange. Paranormal. Supernatural. Real people, real stories. This is the True Fear Podcast.
Some call it the great outdoors. Others call it the bush. Some even refer to it as God's country. Different names, spoken in different places, but they all point to the same vast, empty space. Out here, you come looking for freedom, for fresh air, for quiet, a return to something older, simpler, a place where the noise of the world can't reach you. But the wilderness has another face, one people don't like to talk about. The things out here are wild, they're old. While we may have forgotten the old ways, they haven't. Out here, even the sound behaves differently. It doesn't fade, it travels. Even a single footstep can feel too close, too deliberate. You hear the crack of a branch where no one should be walking, and your response to run or fight could be the last decision you make out here. The longer you sit to listen, the more you understand something deeply wrong. There's no walls, no fences, no locks to hide behind. Just you and the wild. In this episode, we're sharing true horror stories that took place while camping. Stories that took place around dying campfires, when the last embers glow like watchful eyes, when help is hours away, when the trees press in tight, as though they too are leaning in to listen. So get comfortable, zip up your tent, keep your flashlight within reach. And whatever you do, don't go back outside until the morning.
I always thought the woods at night were peaceful. I've been fishing and hunting with my father and grandfather most of my life. I had always been taught to appreciate the peaceful tranquility of the silent woods. That was before I ever had this experience. My buddy Chad and I had driven out past Mill Creek, down the logging road not far from my hometown, where the pines grow so thick they look like black walls on either side. It was late October, hunting season, and we wanted one last overnight trip before the snow started. Chad had picked the spot, a flat clearing near the creek, perfect for a fire, far enough from town that we wouldn't see another soul. By dusk, the fire was going, steaks were sizzling on the grate, and the air was sharp with pine sap and smoke. It felt good, normal, until the woods went quiet. You don't realize how much noise a forest makes until it stops. One moment the crickets were screaming, and the next, nothing. Just the faint hiss of our fire and the sound of my own breath. Chad frowned. "You hear that?" "I don't hear anything," I said. "Exactly." He tried to laugh it off, but I could see the goosebumps rise on his arms. A few seconds later, the noises came back. A trickle of night sounds. Almost as if the forest had exhaled again. We shrugged it off, talked about deer tracks we'd seen, finished eating, and crawled into the tent. That was around midnight. I woke up to a sound like crunching gravel. Footsteps. Slow and deliberate. Just outside the tent. Chad was still asleep beside me, his breathing steady. I held my breath and listened. The steps circled once around us, the soft crack of twigs and the hiss of damp leaves. At first I thought maybe it was a deer, but deer don't walk in circles the way this thing patterned around us. Then came the smell. Metallic. Like rust and wet fur. I reached for my flashlight, hand shaking so bad I hit the tent wall. Then the sound outside stopped immediately. I didn't even breathe. For a full minute, the woods were dead silent. Then something brushed the side of the tent. Not a paw, not a hand. Something long, dragging, like the back of a wet branch scraping canvas. That's when Chad woke up. "What the hell is that?" he whispered. I shushed him. We both sat there, frozen, staring at the spot where the noise had been. Then, nothing. It was complete silence again. After maybe 5 minutes, Chad unzipped the tent. The cold air rushed in, and I felt exposed, vulnerable, like the trees were all watching. He shined his light around with the flashlight, but we didn't see anything. No footprints, no movement, just mist rolling low over the creek. We convinced ourselves it was an animal, maybe a raccoon or a coyote, then went back to our sleeping bags. But I didn't sleep very well after that. Every tiny sound felt magnified. At some point, I must have drifted off, because when I opened my eyes again, it was still dark, but the fire had gone out, and Chad was gone. I called his name. No answer. My breath clouded in the air, thick and white. The cold was biting now, so I grabbed my jacket and the flashlight and stepped out. The mist had gotten worse, so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. "Chad!" The beam of light wobbled over the fire pit, the trees, the faint outline of our cooler. Then I saw footprints, bare, human-looking, leading away from camp toward the creek. I followed them. The closer I got to the creek, the quieter it became again. Then I saw Chad. He was standing by the water, facing away from me, perfectly still. I called out to him, "Chad!" But he didn't move. When I got closer, I saw he was barefoot. His boots were still by the fire. His shoulders twitched like he was shivering, but the air around him felt wrong. Dense, heavy, like static before a storm. "Hey man, what are you—" He turned, and it wasn't Chad. The face was almost his. Same eyes, same jawline, but the mouth was too wide. The skin looked stretched, like it didn't quite fit right. And the eyes, they weren't reflecting the flashlight like normal eyes. They were absorbing it, black as holes. It smiled. Then it made a sound, a horrible low croak that started deep in its throat and ended in a whisper that sounded like my name. I froze, couldn't move, couldn't think. Then it lunged. I ran. God, I ran harder than I've ever run in my life. Branches tore at my face, roots snagged my boots, but I didn't stop until I saw the faint glow of the dying campfire through the trees. I dove into the tent, zipped it up, and grabbed the rifle. Outside I could hear it moving, circling again, slow, deliberate steps. Then silence. A moment later I heard Chad's voice. "Hey, open up, man. What's going on?" My blood went cold. It sounded exactly like him. But I'd seen what was by the creek. "Stay back!" I yelled. He laughed, the same laugh Chad always had when I overreacted. "Come on, dude, let me in." The zipper started to move. "I didn't think! I fired!" The flash lit up the tent and the trees outside. The thing screamed, a wet, gurgling sound that didn't belong in any human throat. Then I heard it run, crashing through the woods like an animal. That's when I stepped out of the tent to confront it. When I stepped out, I saw something running in the dark to my right, but I couldn't make it out. Then to my left, I heard something approaching. So I turned to fire another shot at whatever was coming, but it was Chad. "Whoa! What are you doing?" he said. "Quit pointing that thing at me! What the hell did you shoot?" "Where have you been, Chad?" he said. "I walked over to the trees over there to take a piss. I heard you over here talking to someone, and then all of a sudden I heard the rifle go off, so I ran back over to see what you shot." What the hell was it? A bear? I explained to him what I saw, and that we needed to pack up and head out immediately. But Chad didn't believe me. He said, "You heard it scream when you shot it, so let's track it down and figure out what animal it was." I tried to explain again that this was no animal I saw. At this point, I was almost equally as frustrated as I was terrified. So I told Chad to grab his rifle also, and I agreed to track down whatever it is I shot. We shined the flashlight around the tent and found a trail of what looked like blood. It was similar to blood, but it was thicker and black. It was like a watery tar, and it smelled like rotten eggs. We followed that black trail through the fog, our flashlights cutting narrow tunnels through the mist. The trees felt closer now, like the forest itself was leaning in to listen. Each step we took seemed to echo, too loud, too hollow. Chad crouched beside a dark smear on a fallen log. "It's blood," he whispered. "Has to be." I shook my head. Blood doesn't smell like that. The stench grew stronger. Rotten eggs and iron. It coated the back of my throat and I began to gag. The trail wound deeper into the woods, where the pines turned skeletal and the ground sank into a kind of marshy muck. Every few yards, we'd find more of that oily residue splashed on the leaves or dripping from low branches, as if something wounded had been dragging itself through. After maybe 10 minutes, Chad stopped suddenly. "You hear that?" At first, I thought it was the wind. Then I heard it too. A wet, gurgling rasp somewhere ahead. It was something breathing. We killed our flashlights. The world went black. Only the faint ripple of the creek somewhere ahead and that awful breathing. It was close. Too close. Then, movement. Just a flicker, but enough. A tall shape shifted between two trees, hunched and twitching. Chad raised his rifle. "There it is," he yelled. "Do you see it?" My mouth went dry. "Don't shoot yet." The thing moved again, and this time the beam of Chad's light caught it full in the face. But to both of our surprise, it was my face looking back at us from the dark. But something was off. The skin sagged like melting wax, one eye too low, the jaw lopsided. Its mouth hung open, black fluid dripping from its teeth, and it let out that same wet whisper of my name. "Jesus Christ!" Chad yelled in horror, and then that thing grinned right at him. We both fired our rifles immediately. The forest exploded with light and thunder, birds scattering into the fog. The thing screamed, high and shrill, more animal than human, and crashed backward into the dark. "Did we get it?" Chad asked. I started toward the sound, keeping the barrel up. "Keep your light on it." We pushed through the brush where it had fallen. The ground was torn up, saplings snapped in half, but the trail of black tar led away again, uphill toward the ridge. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but Chad pressed forward. "It's bleeding," he said. "It can't go far." The higher we climbed, the thicker the fog became, until even the beam of the flashlight seemed to bend and fade. Then, from somewhere above us, we heard it call out, but with my voice this time. "Chad, help me." He froze. "That's not you," he whispered. "No kidding," I muttered while gripping the rifle tighter. The thing stepped out onto the ridge, backlit by the faint glow of dawn breaking through the mist. For a moment, it looked almost human again, standing tall, breathing hard. Then its head twisted, too far, almost a full half-turn, and it screamed. Chad fired once more. The shot echoed off the trees, and I swear I saw the thing split, like smoke tearing apart in the wind, before vanishing into the fog. The black trail stopped there, ending at the edge of a rocky drop-off. Below, only the creek and the sound of running water. We stood there in silence, hearts pounding, waiting for something. Movement, sound, anything. But the woods had gone quiet again. Dead quiet. Finally, Chad lowered his rifle. "I think we killed it," he said, almost convincing himself. "It's done." I looked down at the creek, where the mist churned like breath. "No," I said softly. "It's still out there. I can feel it watching." We packed up before the sun had fully risen, neither of us speaking. The forest was awake again, the crickets, the rustle of birds. As we reached the truck, I just started the engine, and that was when Chad and I both heard that same shriek coming from deep in the woods again. Somehow, whatever we hunted last night was still alive and was still in those woods. Chad looked at me with a certain stare that was clear. He was wondering if I was going to drive off, or propose we got back after it. Knowing Chad, if I said, "Let's go fight," he'd fight. But I could tell by the look of his face, he was just as eager to get out of there as I was. So without saying a word, I drove us out of there and never even mentioned what we just heard. Chad and I sat in silence for the majority of the trip back. No radio, no conversation, just the sound of the wind blowing past the speeding truck. I don't know if we were both just in shock or if we both just didn't know how to even bring up what had just happened to us. But neither of us have really ever addressed that night since. We've been on similar trips together since then. Obviously never the same place though, but We've both just avoided the conversation as if bringing it up somehow will conjure up whatever that was we experienced. "14 years. That's how long the three of us, me, Ryan, and Tom, had been coming up to Willow Lake. It wasn't fancy. No cabins, no cell signal, no boat rentals. Just a rough stretch of dirt road that spat you out into a clearing by the water. Every year, same weekend, same plan. 7 days of fishing, bad jokes, and pretending we were still the 20-year-olds who started the tradition. This year was different, though. It was late September, colder than usual. The trees were already stripped bare around the lake, their branches black and skeletal against a pale gray sky. We arrived early afternoon, got the tents up, and cracked open the first beers by the time the sun dipped low. The quiet hit me right away. Usually you'd hear loons calling or wind moving through the reeds, but that evening, the whole lake felt abnormally still. We'd been sitting around the fire for hours, talking about old times. The air had that sharp, metallic bite of fall. Somewhere in the dark, a fish splashed, one single ripple breaking the mirror of the lake. Tom chuckled. "That one's for me tomorrow morning." Ryan smirked. "Yeah, if you can get out of the tent before noon." The normal banter felt good, familiar. Then around 11 we heard a knock. We all froze. It wasn't on a tree. It wasn't an animal. It sounded like knuckles against metal. Tom turned his flashlight toward his truck, parked a few yards away. The light caught something. 2 small figures standing near the tailgate. At first, I thought they were kids, maybe 12, 13 years old. A boy and a girl, both wearing old-fashioned clothes, hooded jackets too thin for the cold, pale skin that looked almost gray under the firelight. Ryan stood. "Hey, are you two okay? You lost or something?" They didn't answer, just stood there, side by side, heads tilted slightly down. I noticed the girl was barefoot. I felt uneasy right away. Willow Lake was 15 miles from the nearest town. There was no way kids could just wander here at night. "Where are your parents?" I asked. The boy finally spoke. His voice was soft, flat. "Can we come in?" The way he said it made my stomach tighten. Not "can you help us?" Not "we're cold," just "can we come in?" Ryan frowned. "Come in where?" The girl lifted her head then, and that's when we saw their eyes. Solid black, no whites, no reflection, just pits, like looking into a hole in the ground. Tom swore under his breath and stepped back. "What the hell's wrong with your eyes?" They didn't blink, didn't move, just stared. The boy repeated, "Please, can we come in?" Something in me said don't answer. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe. Ryan looked freaked out now. "Listen, you kids need to go back to wherever you came from. This isn't funny." The girl tilted her head again. "We can't go back, not until you let us in." Then she smiled. Only it didn't reach her face. It was wrong. Like someone trying to imitate a smile after seeing one in a photo. Tom grabbed the rifle we kept near the tent. "You heard him! Get out of here!" Neither of them flinched. The boy's voice dropped lower. "It won't take long." That's when I noticed the fire. It was dimming, fast. Like someone was drawing the heat out of the air. My breath came out in thick clouds, and the hair on my arms stood straight up. Ryan took a step forward, shining his flashlight on them, and the light flickered out. Just died. Then both kids spoke at once. "You shouldn't have looked." The sound of their voices together was the worst part. Perfectly synchronized, flat, inhuman. Tom fired a shot into the dirt near them. The gunshot echoed across the lake, but the 2 figures didn't move, didn't even flinch. The next second, they were gone. Just gone. No running, no noise, no footprints. One blink and they weren't there anymore. The rest of the night was a blur. We stoked the fire as high as we could and stayed awake till dawn, jumpy at every sound. When the sun came up, everything looked normal again. The woods, the truck, the shore, all still, calm, ordinary. Except for one thing. By the water's edge, there were 2 sets of small, bare footprints, perfectly side by side. And they didn't lead to the lake. They led out of it. We packed up that morning. Ryan didn't want to talk about it. Tom wouldn't even look at the lake. I tried to rationalize it. Trick of the light, maybe some weird local kids, but deep down, I knew better. We didn't go back the next year, or the one after that. 14 years was enough. From that point on, we started going elsewhere every year. I've been fishing all my life. Mostly local spots, ponds, creeks, quiet rivers where you can sit in peace and let the world drift by. But there's one trip I'll never forget. I've told this story a few times over the years, and every time I do, people give me that same look. The half-smile, half-skeptical kind that says they think I'm either lying or trying to scare them. I wish I was. This happened about 5 years ago, down in southern Louisiana. My buddy Mike and I had been talking about finding a new fishing spot, something more secluded, away from the usual crowds. An old co-worker told me about this bend in the river out past Levee Road. He said it was good fishing, quiet, just where the water starts to turn muddy. He said it was the perfect spot for a weekend fishing and camping getaway. So that Saturday we loaded up the boat and drove down there. It was just after sunrise when we got to the levee. The air was thick with humidity, the kind that makes your clothes stick to you. The river was still, flat and dark, reflecting the sky like a dull mirror. I remember saying it looked like one of those places where everything beneath the surface stayed hidden, deep and slow, like the water didn't want to give anything back. We pushed off, drifted out a bit, and started casting. For a good hour, we caught nothing. Not a bite, not even a ripple seen on the surface. Just the buzz of insects and the occasional croak of a frog somewhere along the bank. Mike joked that maybe the fish were smarter than we were for showing up there. At that point, a man on the levee yelled out to us. He said, "Y'all having any luck out there?" It startled me because it came out of nowhere. I looked up and saw a man standing on top of the levee. He looked to be in his 40s, wearing a red basketball jersey and khaki shorts. He was waving at us with this friendly grin, like we'd met before. I waved back, and Mike called out, "Not yet." The man pointed downstream to this old rusted pipe sticking out from the levee wall. It was thick and corroded, half covered in moss and mud. He said, "Try near that old pipe down there. That's where the big ones hang out." We asked him about his familiarity of the area and where the best spot to camp was. He told us he had only been living there on the river about a week, but that he has lived in the area all his life, and he gave us a few recommendations for good spots to set up camp. He also gave us a pretty extensive history lesson on the area, and some tips and tricks his father taught him when fishing this stretch of the river. He was a very nice guy. He seemed as warm and inviting as he was informative. Exactly what you'd expect from a lifetime fisherman. As long as I've been fishing, one thing I've come to appreciate as much as the fishing itself is the culture within American sportsmen, specifically fishermen. The hospitality and generosity experience out here on the water over the years from other fishermen has been unlike anything I've experienced elsewhere, outside of my church family. This guy definitely fit that category. For a guy that appeared to be relatively young, no more than mid-40s, he definitely had a fatherly way about him. He felt sincere and genuinely pleased at the idea of being able to pass along some wisdom to others. So, we thanked him, pulled up anchor and repositioned in the area that he recommended, over by that old rusty pipe. The water there looked nasty, kind of oily, with a thin rainbow sheen floating on top. It smelled like rot and metal, but I felt like I could trust the word of this other fisherman. He said if we want to catch something, then we should cast by this old rusty pipe, so that's what we were going to do. For a while, nothing happened. Then, suddenly, the line went tight. I felt that rush, that electric jolt you get when something big takes the bait. "Got something!" I shouted. The rod bent, the reel groaned, and my heart started racing. But that was short-lived when I felt no head jerk or action at the end of the line. Whatever it was, it didn't move. It was heavy, too heavy, and no matter how I tugged or loosened, the line stayed dead still. I was definitely staggered on something heavy. Mike leaned over to help, and as he did, he looked back up toward the levee. I remember hearing him go quiet for a second before he said, "Hey, where'd that guy go?" I looked too. The levee was empty. No sign of him. He just vanished. We both looked around, thinking maybe he'd gone back down the other side, but the place was wide open. There was nowhere he could have disappeared that quickly. But honestly, I didn't think much of it. I mean, it was weird, but I was more concerned with getting my line unsnagged. I grabbed hold of my braided main line by hand, gave it a good tug, and I felt the line shift. Something below was moving. Slow, heavy, lifting through the water column with each pull. Mike squinted into the water. He laughed. "I think that big fish you caught is actually a log." I laughed too, saying, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're right." Mike said, "There we go. Keep pulling. I think I see it coming up." I continued to slowly drag up my line and reel down. Mike leaned over and said, "Yeah, I can see you're wrapped up on something just under the surface." I reached in the water to grab the branch or whatever I was wrapped up on. He yanked it up out of the water, and that's when we first saw the hand break the surface. Mike immediately screamed in surprise and let go. "What the hell? Did you just see that?" I yelled back. "Yeah! Was that a hand?" "I think I snagged a body. We have to pull it back up." Mike yelled back in disbelief. "Pull it back up! Please tell me you're kidding." I said, "No, I'm not kidding. If that's a dead body, we have to report it." I handed my rod to Mike, told him to keep reeling, and I reached into the water to grab hold of the arm. As I slowly started to drag it from the water, I noticed the hand was in pretty rough shape. The hand was pale and bloated, and the fingers were each missing the fingernails. I continued lifting slowly as more of the body began to surface. The face broke the surface and turned up toward us. It also was gray and swollen. Both of the eyes were gone, and maggots were visible on the back of the head. The body rolled in the current and bumped against the side of the boat with a sound I'll never forget, like a sack of wet sand hitting metal. Mike and I both froze. Mike started stuttering. I couldn't even move. We slowly drifted the boat to shore, and once we reached land, it took me a solid minute to fumble my phone out and call 911. As we stood on the river's edge waiting for the sheriffs to arrive, only a portion of the body's head was exposed. The rest was still submerged in the muddy river. The body was so decomposed at this point, whoever it was would be completely unrecognizable. The sheriff's deputies showed up pretty quick after I called. They got the body out, roped off the area, and then started asking Mike and I several questions. Mike and I told them everything, that we were unfamiliar with the area, the fact that we were out there for an overnight fishing trip. We mentioned the guy on the levee who recommended we fish in the spot where we found the body, and how we managed to get the body to shore. As we described what the man on the levee was wearing, they began to look at each other like we'd said something strange. One of the sheriffs asked if the man on the levee told us his name. I said, "Yeah, if I remember correctly, I believe he said it was Caleb." The other sheriff, an older officer with a gray beard, asked me to describe the man again in full detail. I told him what all I could remember. He was in his 40s, had darker, short-buzzed hair, tan complexion. He wore a red and black basketball jersey with the number 23, and he had some type of tribal tattoo on his upper left arm near his shoulder. He mentioned his name was Caleb, and he said he's lived in the area his whole life, but he'd only been living here on the river for the last week. For some reason, the sheriffs both began to visibly get upset with me. They looked visibly annoyed. They whispered to each other privately, and then one of them walked back to his cruiser, grabbed out a paper, and began walking back. When he got back over to us, he handed me the paper. It was a missing persons flyer. As soon as I realized who was on the flyer, it was as though someone removed all the oxygen from my lungs. I was shocked. The face on that flyer was the same man we'd seen on the levee that morning. His name was Caleb Warren, and he had been missing for a week. The sheriffs told us that his truck had been found parked near that very spot a week ago with the keys still in it. He had fishing gear in the truck bed, his phone was left behind, and his family had been searching the riverbanks for him every day since. I remember just standing there staring at the photo, my mind trying to make sense of it. Because there was no mistaking that face. That was the man who told us to fish near the pipe, and now the sheriff deputies were trying to tell Mike and I that this same man is this missing person they've been trying to locate for the last week. One of the sheriffs then started to get aggressive towards us and said, "What game are you trying to pull?" "I don't understand. We saw Caleb. We found your missing person. I'm telling you, he's who told us to fish over here where we found this body. He must know something about the body. He said he lives here on the river somewhere. You should be looking for him and start questioning him about this body." The sheriff then told us, "That's going to be pretty hard to do, considering the body you boys pulled out of the water is Caleb Warren." Mike and I immediately looked at each other as disbelief and complete confusion. "I don't understand," I said with a shaken tone. The sheriff said, "Follow me, I'll explain." Mike and I followed the deputies to the riverbank where the body was lying underneath a plastic sheet. One of the deputies lifted the sheet, revealing the body's face, but it was completely unrecognizable. He then lifted the sheet more and asked, "Do you recognize the jersey he's wearing?" At that moment, it dawned on me. The same jersey that was on the body is the same jersey Caleb was wearing in the missing person flyer. It was also the same thing Caleb was wearing when he was speaking to me and Mike. But how is this possible? The sheriff didn't have much to say after that. He just told us they'd be in touch for our full statements. It was if they no longer trusted what we had to say after that, as if we were pulling some kind of prank. On the drive home, neither of us said a word for a long time. Finally, Mike said, "You saw him, right? You actually saw him?" I said, "Yeah, I saw him." Neither of us could explain it. If this guy had been missing for a week and has been dead at the bottom of the river, how did we see him? How were we speaking with him just before we found his body? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Caleb's voice again. Calm and casual, saying, "Try fishing near that old pipe down there." And then it hit me. The detail I hadn't even noticed before now. When we first saw him on the levee, his red jersey had looked darker than normal. It looked heavy, like it was wet. I didn't think anything of it at the time. He said he lived on the river somewhere, so it wasn't out of the question that he would be swimming out there. But now, in hindsight, the fact he was wet only added to the strangeness of the overall experience. About a week later, I drove past that levee again. Don't ask me why. Maybe I wanted to convince myself it was just my imagination. As I came around the bend, I slowed down, and I noticed a group of people setting up a memorial at the edge of the river for Caleb. I got out and explained to them how I was the one who found him. After further conversation, the group revealed that they were Caleb's 2 sons and their sons' wives. They expressed their gratitude and told me about how loving and kind their father was, and how fishing was always his favorite pastime. One of his sons, Paul, even told me about how he and his dad often wore each other's clothes. And it was actually Paul's jersey his dad was wearing when he went missing. His sons asked me where and how I found him, because they had been searching this stretch of river all week. I didn't have the heart to tell them all how I thought their father's spirit may have directed me to his body. I mean, that sounds insane just saying it out loud to myself. So, I kept that part from them when explaining how exactly I found him. Every year on the date I found Caleb, I always come by the river's edge and pay my respects. Every so often I bump into his sons there too, cleaning up and redecorating his memorial spot that they set up that first year. The police never did solve Caleb Warren's case. They said foul play was likely, but they didn't have any suspects. Mr. Warren was well respected and well loved in the community. No one could think of a reason as to why someone would try to hurt him, and no one really knows what really happened to him. But every now and then, when I'm out fishing somewhere quiet, I still catch myself glancing up at the shore, half expecting to see Caleb there, waving me toward another spot in the river. It's a bizarre experience that I truly can't make sense out of. But one thing is clear. Mr. Warren was determined to give his family some closure, and somehow, I was used to give it to them. So despite the situation creeping me out beyond belief, I'm at least grateful that some good came out of it. And as friendly and kind as Mr. Warren seemed to be towards Mike and I, and as everyone who knew him claimed he was, I hope Mr. Warren is at peace knowing that his family was able to properly say goodbye and lay his body to rest.
Thank you for listening. Until next time, keep your eyes on the shadows.